Welcome.
Here we are.
35.
What, 35?
Week 35.
Week 35 of
Episode
DJ.
35 and week 37.
What?
I can't believe you guys can still keep count.
Mine says I see number 33.
Okay, Ali's drinking soup.
No, I'm drinking soup IPA. It's kind of a soupy beer.
I got this. I just picked these up from Monkish. It's an IPA, and they just released them today, and I barely made it back because when I went, it's only like 10 minutes away from me, and on the way back, the freeway entrance was closed, so I had to take a detour, and I got here like maybe 10 minutes before, 15 minutes, so it was kind of on a hurry, but
you made it.
Made it here. fresh new beer.
And I'm having a super fresh North End IPA. It's the hood that I'm living in, North End, and it can't be any more local. It's just literally brewed 4 blocks away. It's a New England style IPA, which is one of my favorite beers, and brewed here.
Miss myself the Northern district. I haven't visited you in a while, Chris.
You haven't been here in a while. I was just pouring my beer on top
all
of
over
my
your stuff. Oh, nice.
Well done.
Did you go to the brewery to pick up the beer? You went right
Yeah,
to the brewery?
the brewery is also the shop.
Ah, okay, nice.
That's where my friends, all my friends, my fans' friends, got me the beers last time. It's like
it's
that's the place where I usually get my beers. They have a great selection. They have their own brewery, and they sell beers that are brewed within the radius of 100 kilometers, like of befriended. No, what do you say? Friendly breweries in a
friendly brewery, local friendly brewery.
Local friendly breweries. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
How are you? How is everyone? Mo, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking water today. I just woke up and I can't start.
Water?
Sorry, guys.
This is DJs and Beers.
This would wake you up.
I know.
Matt, our friend Matt Radio Slave, is missing in action today. He apologizes for not being on. But sometimes we all have to take a break, right?
Yeah.
To do other stuff.
Like a personal day.
Well, I need to give a shout out to Alex, who I met yesterday. He's a craft beer distributor here in Barcelona. Turns out he's also good friends with Paul Rich, so we have a mutual friend in common, and he watches the show every week.
Nice.
And I met up with him, and he gave me a really great selection of local craft beer. So this one is from Barcelona, brewed right here in Barcelona. And
what's the name of the brewery?
I'm trying to find out. I believe it's Garage Beer Company.
Garage Beer Company. Okay.
I believe it's Garage Beer Company. Yeah. Anyway, it's delicious.
It's I'm interested why it's called
soupy.
soup. Yeah, it's like, what does it say? What's in it, or what makes it a soup, or is it just a name? I wonder if they're doing some weird ingredients.
Yeah.
Chicken broth.
Dude, there's this brewery in the East Coast.
Chicken broth, yeah.
There's a brewery in the East Coast that made an IPA where they threw in fried chicken into the beer.
Oh,
Great.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. I don't know how good it is, but it just sounds.
I guess that's not vegan.
It's definitely not
Definitely
vegan.
not. And someone else in the same brewery did it with cheeseburgers and French fries.
I think if we brewed beer, like if we were at the brewery every day, we'd be trying all kinds of crazy shit.
Yeah,
like
that's
every day,
exactly what they're
a
doing.
list of different things. Right?
Like, what if we just throw in fried chicken and see what happens?
Yeah, see what happens.
They released it. I don't know how well it did, but
There's got to be a brewery that throws weed in there.
Yeah, definitely is.
There are hemp beers, but I don't know about weed.
Enhanced beers?
Hemp.
I thought you said enhanced beers.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm sure they sell beer with THC in it. I think I've even seen them at the dispensaries around here.
Actually, I know what you're talking about, but I don't think it's beer. It's water.
Well, they sell sodas, definitely. I've seen all kinds of Coca-Colas and everything.
I know Lagunitas did a THC water, but maybe they put in some hops in there to give it a flavor. I don't know. I had one a long time ago and it was all right, but didn't really get very high for me.
Yeah.
But I don't smoke weed, so I don't. Maybe I should know this, but I don't. What's the difference between CBD and THC?
Maybe you should start.
Yeah.
CBD doesn't have THC.
Huh?
Yeah, CBD, it doesn't have the psychoactive part of the drug that gets you high. So
it just has the health benefits.
So they say you get all the medical benefits of marijuana without the actual, paranoia and getting high with it.
Anxiety.
But the THC part will put you on your ass.
Chris, which part do you like?
I like every aspect of this plant.
Because I take CBD gummies sometimes for before bed and stuff. Kind of helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get high.
Yeah, it's kind of homeopathic, you know like these little things. Yeah.
Like, do you wake up? It helps you go to bed, or you wake up feeling better?
It helps you go to bed. Like these ones I have some melatonin in it as well, so it helps you fall asleep and relax.
Yeah, Chris got me a CBD pen once. That thing was awesome, especially for just calming down anxiety in general.
Absolutely, it's great. There's this great company. I can just tell everybody again. Last week I did a shout out. This great company It's called Lock and Key Remedies. Lock and Key Remedies. It's based in New York. They do really good stuff. Really
How
nice
do you
people.
get them?
Nice.
Get it. This is legal in Germany too. You can send it over.
Oh right, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But can you buy CBD stuff in shops over there?
Yeah, there's actually a CBD store right across the street from my place. It's always empty somehow, and I don't really know what they're doing there. But I guess they're waiting so weed is legalized in Germany, and then it's the biggest store. But
Is that on the cards for weed over there?
it's what?
Is
For
that
legalizing?
is that gonna happen soon or
No, never.
never?
I have no idea what politicians in Germany are thinking. It's just like they don't even discuss it. It's like it blows my mind. Everybody should just look over to the States, what's happening there in certain states, and how beneficial it is for tax income and for schools and everything. You know, all the money that pours in.
I think it's been a while before anyone's looked at the states as something to strive for.
Let's say to individual states, not the actual whole country. I'm reading the comments here in my YouTube channel, and is there a possibility that we have a certain hum or a certain noise in our broadcast here?
I don't hear anything.
I mean,
I
we
don't
can
hear
hear it
anything.
because we're broadcasting, but does anybody hear that, or is it just two random people telling me in the comments that there's a weird noise? Maybe you didn't turn up your dishwasher or something. Turn off. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty quiet over here. I
No,
guess I
we
can
don't.
log in and see, but that would take up too much time.
Too much valuable.
Sounds like a radiator. It sounds
So wait,
like
is the weed industry, has it been like thriving more than ever before during this whole pandemic situation, just like the alcohol industry?
Absolutely, it has been, and the amount of tax income that it's been generating for states is extraordinary. Like Colorado's been raking in the loot for the state in general, and same goes for California.
Colorado is like an example of, you know, that whole legalization thing kind of being done. They're like the model example, right?
Yeah.
Of everyone.
Now,
They were one of the-
Yeah, they have been, because they were one of the first states to legalize, I believe.
I think they were the first.
Yeah.
and now Oregon
Hey.
with decriminalizing all drugs. I wonder how
Yeah, that's a good
other
idea.
states, or if other states will follow, or maybe not. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Talking about legalizing drugs, we have an amazing guest tonight. And before we get him on, what? Ali, you did a really, really fantastic post for this show where you talked about like your early days with electronic body music and that kind of stuff. Can you, maybe for those who missed the post, can you just give us a little recap of everything, like how you got to know Nitzer and how you grew up in that kind of music?
I mean, I was a huge fan of like goth and new wave, as I've said many times over the years in interviews. And I mean, I would skip school to go and hang out in a record store. And hanging out in a record store, the record store owner and the people that worked there would always see me, and they would always bring me different things to check out, like new things to check out. And they brought me the album, That Total Age. And, you know, I was listening to all kinds of stuff. And
Yeah.
DC had like a really, you know, internationally recognized punk scene. So I was heavily into like the punk music, the local punk music. And obviously that influenced bands around the world. And when I heard, and this kind of what I was alluding to in my post, when I heard Nitzer, some people say Nitzer.
Well, that's
always,
that's the
Doug,
thing that I wanted to discuss later on too,
we can,
because
we can ask Douglas about that.
yeah,
But
us in Germany, we grew up saying Nitzer because it's German. It's like Nitzer, but then I don't know, when I first met Douglas, he was like, "What?" And I'm like, "No, you're not saying Nitzer? No, apparently it's Nitzer." But we can ask him.
Is it Nitzer or Nitzer? Or is it
well,
tomato? Tomato?
I've only heard Douglas refer to it as Nitzer, so I'll just go with that.
I mean, if the person from the band says it, so it's
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I used to get people correcting me all the time. Like, what? Nitzer? It's Nitzer, dude.
But it's
Nitzer.
funny, you as an American say that too. I thought it was me being German.
Yeah.
I've always heard Nitzer. Yeah.
Tomatoes,
You too.
tomatoes.
Maybe you all spoke to a lot of Germans all the time.
Yeah.
David, you don't really have a history with post-punk and gothic and all that kind of music, no?
And more in recent times, I've been like kind of poking around in that stuff and finding some really cool music. And Mo actually sent me the Basic Pain Procedure album, which I was listening to. I was like, damn, this is dope. I like that. Like that minimalist kind of. There's that, I don't know, there's that certain sound that I really like, and that definitely got me being a fan to look into some more stuff.
Yeah,
but growing up, growing up, I wasn't into the goth stuff or anything. That came way later when I started opening my mind a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a little bit younger, so by the time that I actually started diving into industrial music and learn about EBM, it already had been established and it had been around for a while. And I mean, that Total Age album was incredibly influential for me, and it played a big role in the development of my musical style and with the kind of music that I make. And I mean, just about everything. I was kind of just a big sponge when I was a kid and soaked it up. And I met Douglas over the years and was starstruck the first time I met him, and just completely happy to say he's a good friend now. And I think we should bring him in.
We should bring him in. I was preparing for the show by watching this really, really cool footage from 1989, 15th of December. So it's almost literally 31 years ago at Frankfurt's very famous Dorian Gray Club. And when you look at the audience, like that's Douglas there. And when you look at the audience, they even do the pogo dance. Have you heard of the pogo dance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Where everybody's fighting on the dance floor. It's like a mosh pit.
We call it moshing, I think.
But maybe we should ask Douglas about all that.
Yeah. Is Douglas even with us?
There he
Douglas,
is.
are you with us?
I am.
Hey.
Douglas, do you recognize yourself here?
I do. That was in Frankfurt Airport.
Yeah.
In the parking lot of Frankfurt Airport. There used to be a club called Dorian Gray.
Yeah.
Yep.
And actually they used to do it. It was techno club in Dorian Gray before techno really kind of meant what it.
Yeah, tell that to the people in Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. I know a few of those guys. I'm sure I can swing it. Yeah. Yeah.
There's always been that large debate, and we've always brought that up. I've always kind of figured that the Frankfurt vision of techno was kind of based more on the EBM thing than it was the Detroit sound.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wait,
I think so.
Are you
Yeah.
saying...
I mean, it's what?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
It's always interesting to have that kind of the comparison of like the history of both are relatively similar. I mean, I think that because of the Chicago house influence in the Midwest, that kind of people were not so knowledgeable about how hard hitting things were in Detroit.
Yeah.
Just because it was less successful immediately, but then obviously with Derek and the rest of those guys.
Yeah.
I got a funny story about Derek actually.
There's a lot of funny stories going on out there.
Mainly told by Derek.
Well, Douglas, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Chris. Always good to see you guys. Mo, Ali, and nice to meet you. Truncate, hadn't had the pleasure before.
You Douglas. Guys have met before, haven't you, David? Didn't you guys play together at that? You and Brad had
Terence?
No, it wasn't with Terence. What was that one underground party that Johnny Love was doing in downtown?
No.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I saw a flyer, man.
What?
I don't think
you guys
Brad
played together.
Did you? Did we?
It was you, Brad, and somebody else. You had like a project called.
Oh no, we didn't do it. We didn't do it because it was just as they did the lockdown, or they were just about to do the lockdown in LA.
Yeah.
And we started we'd been rehearsing and doing stuff, and then we're sitting there a couple of days into getting the set sorted, and we looked at each other like, do we really want to be in this, a fairly dirty part of LA with not the cleanest people, lovely people, but not necessarily the cleanest people, all sweating in a room?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so Johnny understood. Yeah. No, we weren't. You're right. We were supposed to play together, but we never had,
All right.
never had the pleasure. So I caught a little bit of the show before I joined.
Yeah.
You were the CBD enlightenment for Ali.
Yeah, I'm a novice.
We give our dogs CBD, just so you know. So you're way behind.
Way behind.
Get with the program, man.
Do you partake in the CBD or the THC?
I do. I actually do I do edibles every now and again, but I kind of because of the voice thing, I kind of avoid smoking stuff, and even the vape thing. I'm not really into vaping. I don't know. I mean, I did do a lot before, but fairly mellow about that stuff now. Just the smack.
You guys started in
the light stuff.
You guys started in 1982, and we were just talking earlier about how we discovered that landmark album, that Total Age. I mean, what was the catalyst for you? What were your influences? You mentioned influences before. What were your influences that led you to create such a unique debut sound and an overall sound that evolved?
Well, I think you and I, Ali, we've talked before about the kind of certainly for you with like the 930 Club and the kind of like the punk influence, but also the post-punk kind of goth, or what went on to be goth, or whatever the hell you want to call it.
Yeah.
There was a time where it was called positive punk in England, but like Killing Joke, Theatre of Hate, even Susie and the Banshees, even though they were part of the punk scene, I don't think they even got signed till 79 to like Polydor or Chrysalis, whatever it was. But it was really that post-punk scene of still having the kind of ethos of punk, but with a little bit more subtlety going on. We were really into that, but we were also into, it was still we grew up in the 70s. So stuff, disco stuff basically was also a part of what we listened to. So it was wanting to have the feel of good disco, like mixing Divine with the Sex Pistols, or like playing Mighty Real with Killing Joke, So that was our feeling, is to try and mix these two genres, which we were fairly, I think Ali, because we're similar generation, there was pop music, rock music, and then alternative music. There was no real in between of that. Yeah. And so the umbrella, if you liked alternative music, you liked The Cure, you liked Depeche Mode, and those were like the most easy to get into, but you also liked, and I'll name a few more kind of obscure ones, but you also liked the Virgin Print, you liked Crass, you liked, and even some of the metal stuff. I know Mo's a little bit of a metalhead over there in his youth, but even that stuff like the TSOL and, the really good like punk metal that was happening. And so that was our style. We were also skaters, so we listened to a lot of the kind of West Coast punk, as well as like, the ubiquitous, obviously Devo were part of everyone's kind of party playlist. So it was a mishmash of stuff, but basically about an energy. And then we started to get into, we were listening to the Declining and DeBosen, DAF's first album, which was actually, I think it was Mute's first signing in that first full-length album. Yeah. So we heard that, which we thought was great because it was very punk. And then once, went on to Golden Lieber and, the follow-up ones that were, unfortunately for Daniel Miller, were on Virgin. But that really kind of sealed the deal for us, that you can make this really simplistic electronic music. And about that time also, there was another couple of German influences, Malaria, and then Neubauten.
Yeah,
Of course.
I was a massive Neubauten fan. Yeah, still am.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
Einstürzende
so amazing
Neubauten.
when you listen to it. Yeah. So that was,
Missing
it was,
Einstürzen.
you know,
All right.
it's kind of like a mix of everything that was happening at the time.
And were you part of like a community of other kind of like-minded artists who,
Well,
who all like believed in this kind of sound that you ended up,
But and where were you at that time?
We were growing up in a town like 25 miles east of London, so it's like a commuter suburb, basically town, and there were people we like, the only way that you could listen to the music you wanted to listen to in a club is if you made your own club. So that's what we'd do. Either it'd be like a one night thing in some bar, or like a residency for a month or two. But there weren't that many people that were that much into what we were doing. We didn't have guitars, which everyone hated, and we had one single sequence going and 4 on the floor drums, which were live, and then me shouting. So we did make it easy for people.
well, were you ever a fan of Suicide? And
yeah, absolutely. But that was kind of later.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was like early 80s, right?
Yeah, so we were kind of later is what I meant.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I just recently discovered Basic Pain Procedure and started going through that stuff.
Yeah.
So that was what you guys were doing in the early time, especially with just like the floor tom and a snare drum or something, just a really basic setup.
Yep. Yeah, there was myself, a gentleman called David Gooday, who I got a text from him saying he's watching right now. So shout out to Dave.
So how did that stuff make its way into Daniel Miller?
Yeah,
it's a good question. I think he's the main person that asked that question over and over again. The hell did I sign this band? To this day.
Good question is, did he sign Nitzer app or did he sign Nitzer app?
Oh, see, there used to actually, there's a I think it was WDRE, or is that New York? Back in when the college radio days, there was a college radio in Detroit that was ironically across the Detroit River in Windsor, which is where, of course, the beloved Richie is from. And that was the college radio station for Detroit. And back in the 80s, they did a Nitzer, Shaman, the Weekend. We say Nitzer, we don't care. Nitzer.
Well, here in Germany, it was definitely Nitzer because I grew up with this. That's why I just can't get that out of my system.
Well, here's a dumb question.
Pronunciation.
Does it mean anything?
Yeah, that's the next good question. Where is the name coming from? Why did you choose that?
Was there a translation?
Well, like all good teenagers, you think that you've made something up that no one else has thought of. So we started cutting up letters, actually thinking that we were copying David Bowie, not realizing that Bill Bryson had already done cut-ups to make, entire poems and books and actually movies. So we thought we were copying Bowie by cutting up letters. We put him in a hat and we picked out, you got Nitzer. Wow. See, and you got me saying it, Nitzer.
So before you were doing the electronic stuff, were you like in a punk band or in a band with like guitars and stuff like that?
Bon and I, we started. Well, Dave and Bon actually were the original. We were in high school, so we all went to high school together. They were like the year ahead of me, so I was like the kid, and they'd started with a Juno synth, what was it called? A Gen synth, where you could buy from a catalog, like a catalog that sold, everything. and you could get it. It was like before there was online and Amazon, you'd have these massive catalogs that would have all this crap in it. So they had these gen synths. So they had a synth, and then they asked me to be involved as a singer, but we didn't have a sequencer. So Bon would just play all the sequences with, 2 fingers. We didn't have a mic, so I'd use the one side of headphones plugged into the mic jack, and then Dave would hit things.
Yeah.
And that was how we started. So, but during that stage, at one point we had a guitar, because we were also heavily influenced actually by the Sheffield scene, like Cabaret Voltaire and Human League, but especially Cabaret Voltaire. And so we found it surprisingly easy to copy Cabaret Voltaire. So we did a lot of kind of that stuff on guitar, like one string playing. But that was about it. I mean, I was 15 when we did our first show.
When
I think
when
I
did
was
it become
17.
17?
Yeah.
When did it become? I'm assuming it was kind of a hobby, like an after school, or you were skipping school and then making music.
Skipping school.
Yeah, but when did it become like more than just a hobby? When did it become like a career path for you? Or were you not even conscious of that? Things just kind of evolved.
Well, you kind of, I mean, I think like most bands, even though we kind of hated the idea of being called a band, or didn't feel any affinity with certainly any of the local bands that were around us. Like I say, started at 15, and then we got signed to Mute when I was 17.
Wow.
So in that 2 years, what we did was Barn had left school and was working in his parents' greengrocers in the village where he lived. I was still in high school, so I starved myself and used all the dinner money I was given by my parents to buy lunch. He and I saved up for a year to buy an SH-101 that had just been, originally we were saving up for a sequential circuits because we needed a synth that had a sequencer in it, because we couldn't afford to buy a synth and a sequencer. So in that interim of starting to save up, and the sequential circuits was like, it was like £500, and then Roland sold the SH-101 for $250. So Roland actually helped the band develop quite quickly. So we got the Roland SH-101, and that meant we could do gigs a lot easier. So we started booking a lot. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Still rocking.
So I take it the SH-101 was after the infamous Wasp synth then.
Oh yeah. So the infamous Wasp synth that kind of missed a lot of keys. Funnily enough, a plastic synth with a touch sensitive keyboard. Yeah. We still used it actually when we had the SH-101, but we couldn't. Bond couldn't really do the 16s on that. But what he would do,
I bet he could do it now.
He could do it now, maybe. If you could find a Wasp that works. Yeah. But what he did do when we played live with the SH-101, we'd have the first tune, which would be whatever, Murderous, Join in the Chant, would be the first tune set up to go. And then once we'd finished that track, he'd pull out the jack cord. So you'd hear this big, he'd pull that out and then put headphones in. And then as we're on stage, he would quickly put in the next song, listen to it once, so like one bar of it, because they're only 1 bar songs. Take out that and then put the jack back in, and we do the next song.
That's fucking impressive.
So you could fairly say that some of your music was based on happy accidents in the early days?
Still is.
I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are accidents, because you surround yourself with this material, and if it's not working, you make it work, and that's what the sound that comes out.
I think it's that, and kind of alluding to what Ali was saying. You don't, like, we didn't have a feeling of like, all right, we need to do the, X, Y, and Z to get where we want to be. our first thing was, let's do a gig in Chelmsford where we lived. So we did a gig in Chelmsford where we lived. We're in the bar, actually, the pub that we used to go to every night of the week. And then cheers.
Yeah, that was the word.
Yeah.
And then we, as soon as we did that, then we're like, we need to do gigs in London. So we started doing gigs in London. As soon as we did that, we wanted to do gigs in Europe. So we started to go to Spain, actually, was the very first place we played outside of the UK. We didn't actually play at the Spook Factory, but we'd play shows in Valencia and like end up at the Spook Factory at like 6 a.m. until 4 p.m. the next day. And that was our first like, wow, there's a whole other way of doing what we thought, rock music or the music industry should be. So every time we did one thing, so we wanted to release a record, so we did Basic Pain Procedure. So we made a label, recorded it, pressed vinyl, sold it. That allowed us to go to Europe. Then we started to get interest from Mute Records and some American labels for the first few singles that we did on our label, Power Voice Communications. One of which was Let Your Body Learn, and it was when we did Let Your Body Learn that Daniel Miller contacted us, and then we started to think, oh, this could be a career. This could be something that is possible.
What was the first place you visited in the US on tour when you first went on tour? Can you remember?
Funnily enough, it was LA.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
We'd gone to the very first place in North America was Montreal. There was a gay club there called Au Garage, and we did 2 nights at Au Garage.
Do you remember the year?
That would have been 85.
Right.
So we'd released, I think we'd released Warsaw Ghetto that year, and that's what could have been the end of 85 or the beginning of 86, but I'm pretty sure it was 85. And so what happened was that Daniel was already interested. Daniel Miller from Mute was already interested and was already speaking to us. And then Sire Records, the infamous Seymour Stein, came up from New York to see us play. And then Mike Rosenblatt from Geffen Records also came up. And then suddenly, we didn't know what the hell was actually happening. Yeah. We had like a bidding war in the States. Mute, we already signed with Mute by that point. And then we did the Music for the Masses tour opening for Depeche Mode in, I think that was
87, right?
80, yeah, I think so. 87. And we were supposed to open for them in the US, continuing that tour. And even though by that time we were assigned to Geffen, US immigration, which was notoriously difficult at that time for Europeans.
I think they still are.
They're definitely getting like it again. I mean, I'm for my sins a citizen, but we'll see. But they refused to allow us into the US to play, refused our work permits, citing that we lacked musical merit. And
wow.
which Bon and I were just like, well, yeah, that's ridiculous. It's the whole point. And that's when in 89 we came back. When we did the second album, Belief, we opened the tour in LA, and that was the first show.
Do you remember what the venue was in LA?
Sorry.
It was the Palace.
Oh,
nice.
Palace. All right. That's Avalon now.
Yeah.
Avalon, yeah, that's it. I was trying to remember what it's called now.
But Douglas, can you take us a little bit back to you were probably 17, 18, 19 years old when you did the first tours. How was touring back then? How did it work out? Like we're just spoiled DJs. We get into a plane, get flown somewhere. How did that look like, the early tour days? Especially also with with the music you were making, because you were groundbreaking, doing something new that people were not really expecting. So you probably had to deal with a lot of like, I don't know.
Let's hear all the debauchery.
Yeah. What were the audience?
I don't mean the show's long enough.
Yeah. How were these days?
Yeah.
Traveling, touring.
Well, it was the same as any, like a normal band, but we didn't have any guitars, and we had like a fraction of a drum kit, but we took like metal sheets and other things, metal drums with us to play. And it was just like any other band starting out when you're teenagers. We just didn't have any guitars, but we'd get in a van and you start driving, and hopefully the sound guy is good at negotiating the fee. When we actually first started, we had no idea that you're supposed to have any of that, because when we went to, like, when we first did shows outside of the UK, we didn't even know you're supposed to have a contract. But I would take care of it for everybody by just, and you'd have to speak on the phone because there was obviously no internet. Yeah. So I'd talk to these guys, these promoters that didn't speak very good English. I spoke no Spanish, still don't. And the only way I could think that we could guarantee that we could get there and come home was to make sure they mailed us the plane tickets, like literally in the mail.
Yeah.
And so that was our guarantee. And we just thought, well, worst case scenario, we get to go to Spain for a few days. that was our approach. But it was hard. Like, in Spain, it was good because the audience had already been, this was before Balearic Beats, but the whole scene in southeastern Spain, like I was saying, around Valencia, was already, it was very electronic already in Spain, and people really got the idea of things being kind of minimal and electronic and quite aggressive and hard. In fact, they liked it the more it was like that. When we first toured the US, other than like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Detroit, obviously, actually Houston, but like kind of the major cities, anywhere where we played in between, it was horrible. It was like that scene in Blues Brothers where they're behind the chicken wire and people are throwing beers at them. It's that kind of.
Maybe that's the way. Yeah, I think that's the way you break America. I remember hanging with Paul Oakenfold many years ago, and he had opened for U2 on a series of dates, and we were just chatting about that. And he said Bono basically told him that's how U2, captured the hearts and minds of America by playing every, like all the territories outside of the obvious ones, of the obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stuff. They
and that was the other thing that's the other thing as well, is that it kind of fed into our we were still teenagers when we were doing all that, or early 20s when we were touring in the States. And it fed into our general angst as, like kicking against the industry, kicking against everything, which is essentially like, I think how any of us get through is like, absolutely. I can do better than any of you have even thought of. It's like,
yeah.
You guys know you have to have that ego.
Yeah. And
indeed.
Yeah. When you met, what was it? How did the sound shift and become a bit more like polished when you met? Was it when you met Phil Harding, who was this part of
Phil was great.
Yeah.
But he was doing, for people that know any history of stuff with PWL, which was the Pete Waterman studio. So Phil Harding, Pete Waterman Studios was what they call it, the Hit Factory.
Yeah.
So it had all of these.
On every record.
Kylie Minogue and stuff like this, right?
Exactly, yeah. Dead or Alive, You Spin Me Round.
Yeah.
And actually the mastermind behind all of their hits, even though Pete Waterman would disagree, was Phil Harding, because he literally had a formula that was working at the time, and he used it on every artist. And Daniel Miller's nickname for him was Formula Phil. And, and Phil Harding liked the name as well. But he was right. And so when we worked with Phil, we were kicking against that formula. But guess what? His version of Joining the Chant, which sounded quite different before we worked with him, is if you listen to, I mean, I can't remember exactly which track it is. I think it's like Mel and Kim. Remember that? The two sisters that are from London. There's a Mel and Kim track, and it's all the same bass sounds, which are DX7. And the only thing that we would add is like there would be, or he'd kid us that there was a bit of SH1 under it or a bit of Korg or something. But he used all the same drum sounds. The whole track structure of it, apart from me yelling, like there's no chorus, obviously, like a pop track. But he brought that formulaic sound to what we did, and that was a breakthrough. But we didn't like it at the time at all. So our change happened was that after we'd released, or after Mute had released That Total Age, then Depeche asked us to tour with them in Europe, and and it was actually the first night of seeing Depeche Mode play live. And we'd liked Depeche when they were first starting, and then after that we're like, disinterested in them because they're pop stars and they're just whatever. And then we saw I clearly remember it, like standing at the side of the stage watching them perform, and Bon and I looking at each other, and we're like, that's a performance. So when we got off that tour, we started, as Mo said, we started working with Flood, and we started to formulate songs, still as simple as we could make them, but we started to think about how we're going to perform that to a live show and to people, hopefully.
How were the audiences when you opened up for Depeche Mode? I mean, were they also fans? Did they hate you guys?
It varied. It definitely varied.
I saw you guys at the I think it was at Merriweather Post Pavilion, right?
Oh, it's for the Violator tour.
Maybe that was the Violator tour. Yeah. No, everybody was. By then, I mean, everybody was a massive, Nitzer Ebb fan. So.
By then, everyone, when we were doing there was this is kind of like, I mean, there were some places where it was a little bit better, but this kind of summarizes how the audiences in general received us. So we had to learn all these like rock and roll biz terminologies. So at the time they had 3 of these ramps to go out, which we then learned what ego ramps meant. So you had these ramps to go out into the audience, and we were told we could only use one of the ego ramps, which is the one in the middle. So I think it was actually during Joining the Chant, and I'd gone to the end, and at the time Bon and I were wearing like a white wife beater, black shorts, white socks, and DMs, which is like, you became the ubiquitous EBM kind of style. And I ran down to the end of the middle, designated ego ramp, and went to throw myself on the ground and didn't quite see the end of the ego ramp. Yeah. Went straight off the end and went down about 9 feet onto this crowd barrier, smashed the side of my head on it, and then tried to climb back up on the stage. There's actually blood coming out of my ear and stuff, which was all we carried on with the show. So there was a lot of kind of like good feeling between the crew and the band and some of the people at the front. But then the next night, I think that show was in Marseille. I can't remember. We were doing a run in the south of France. The next night, all these kids that had gone, all these Depeche Mode fans that had gone to the previous show where I fell off, had gone there with kamikaze rolls around their head, and the whole show they were pointing for me to fall off the stage again.
Oh my God. Did they think that was a part of the act?
I think they just thought it was funny.
Became your signature move after that.
It did a bit, yeah. I've fallen off,
there's this
fallen off the
question I
stage
wanted
a
to.
couple.
There's a question I wanted to ask. I think I brought it up before with Chris and Ali and Mo. Where did the term electronic body music come from? EBM.
Hey, blame the Belgians.
Yeah.
The Belgians. Oh.
Yeah, I guess the Belgians of the
Yeah. I think it came out of, I mean, for me, it was like the way people would describe Front 242, but also Nitzer, you know.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, we got lumped into it for sure.
Yeah.
But it was the English press kind of liked it because, you know, music press around the world, they like a label. It's a lot easier than spending time trying to describe a history and everything. So they really liked it. So the EBM thing stuck. We were resistant to it for years just because we were like, you know, we still are at the age of 54, 55. We're still kids at heart. And we're like, don't tell us what to do. Don't label us.
But especially now, being that the sound is so incredibly relevant, even within the techno scene in particular. You know what I mean? Now
it's so relevant now. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. You have all the adopters like Phase Fatale and Silent Servant, and them are like, you know,
I love Phase Fatale. Yeah.
Yeah, they're bringing it to the forefront. And
Juan, who's a very good friend of ours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome guy.
It must be a surreal feeling to see, just like after years, how the sound just continuously permeates through the scene the way it does.
So it's interesting. I've had these conversations with anyone that sticks around long enough. That basically that it gets to a point, no matter how much people are confused or, you know, actually don't like what you're doing. And I think that it's not even about how good what you're doing is. It's whether they're willing to understand it. What happens is that over the course of time, there's just like a tipping balance where they're like, I don't really understand it, but you know, they've been around this amount of time. There must be something to it. And then it starts to permeate more into other people's general feelings. I mean, you know, Ali, you've been around for a long time and it's different for what you were doing, what you started off doing. Same for us, completely different. But you know, you've got this kind of like background, and Chris as well, Mo, all of us, you know, it's like you've got this background of like, I know how things will go up and down, and there are leaner years and bigger years. And ultimately, if you just keep soldiering on, you know. Yeah. It's what Andrew Weatherall used to always say, just, you know, 30 years of soldiering is all it takes to make people be successful.
Yeah. How did the critics, you obviously won, you know, the fans, you know, us being, you know, among the hardcore fans. What was the critical reaction to that Total Age and your sound? Were they dismissive or supportive, or did they just not understand it and, you know, acknowledge it because you struck a chord with that generation and it was relevant?
I mean, pretty much all of the above. Depending where you were, the UK critics, you know, traditionally, especially at that time, were very
nasty,
very combative. Yeah, they're nasty, but we used to think it was funny, and we'd be nasty back to them. So, you know, like Mute used to hold their head in their hands whenever we'd come back from an interview, and they'd start hearing stories that we'd done during the interview. Like I remember sort of having a physical altercation with a journalist in Brussels, actually. We hadn't even done the interview at that point. I just decked him. But
he probably deserved it.
He did, of course he did. Me do anything stupid?
Because the music was so aggressive. Did you feel like you as a person, you guys as a band, needed to be somewhat confrontational with your audience?
Totally, yeah.
To live up to the sound.
Well, Yeah, but I mean, it's also, I mean, like, you know, anyone that's gone, you know, from that kind of era of like going, you know, I mean, what our first shows were like, there's a few iconic shows that I remember when we were teenagers. And one was Southern Death Cult, as they were called then, the Cult opening for Bauhaus. And then Malaria, Einsender Neubauten, and the Birthday Party was like, that was the lineup. And like, we came out of that show and we're just like, yeah, we are going to be as aggressive as that every show. We're not going to take any crap from anybody. And it really, it is exactly what you're saying, that you feed off it. And then after a while, it's a performance for sure.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it's just how you are. You're just, you know, that dumb and angry.
So you were saying that the British media was pretty harsh, but what about the US? Because it seemed like you guys were rather, you know, accepted here in the US and got quite a positive exception. You know what I mean?
Again, it was depending which, I mean, because the US is obviously such a large continent that you go from one city to the next and it would be completely different. Detroit, hands down, everything. The reception was great. We'd get loads of press leading up and afterwards. But like once you're, you know, in certain other cities, it wouldn't be quite as good. DC was always great. But
what about
like
Chicago
Boston,
and the whole
for some reason?
Chicago, the whole Wax Tracks thing?
Yeah, exactly. Chicago was always great as well. And then the other thing was that we were embraced very early on by the gay club scene.
And by the Chicago house music scene, right?
Yeah, totally. So they, you know, everyone came to see us when we played. Detroit techno guys would come out, Chicago scene would come out, and we were, it was like being amongst knowledgeable friends that we'd never met, you know. Are you on the sake over there, Ali?
Ali's on the sake.
I mean,
again. I'm back on the sake.
Nitzer is oftenly coined as a huge influence by most of the Detroit techno guys. I mean, as being kind of the music that helped them bring the kind of formative sound of techno to the forefront.
Yeah, I think that there is a, you know, the trajectory of Nitzer is inexorably linked to Depeche in a way, because a lot of those guys were first hearing like pure electronic music done not in a kind of pop way through Depeche. And then we came along, and Kraftwerk obviously before Depeche. So it's like a kind of a staggered introduction. But by the time we came along, it was like, yeah, that's exactly what we want to hear, is like really hard versions of Kraftwerk, Depeche. And yeah, there was obviously, you've got some other stuff happening from the US as well.
Sure.
When was your first introduction to like Detroit techno, and what did you think?
I think it was when we first went there, really. Like we'd heard some of the stuff it was just starting to sort of break on the, you know, inner city stuff on the radio in the UK. Mm-hmm. But we didn't realize that it really was so important to the city until we went and played and then met these people. And the general scene there was again, it reminded us of growing up. So you had like punk kids and you know, like pure electronic music kids all in the same room and enjoying it.
And Douglas, how did you approach your lyric writing? Like you mentioned, you came up with the name Nitzer, you know, by cutting up letters and kind of piecing it together until it looked cool or sounded cool, whatever.
Yeah.
Did you have the same approach to phrases that you would repeat over and over again, that became like, each phrase became like this kind of, you know, anthem within the song, you know, like a call to arms kind of a refrain? Like what was your approach to how you wrote lyrics to, let's say, like Murderous, you know?
So I used to write. Yeah, exactly. I used to write a lot of poetry before we started the band, and it was really wordy. Like I'd have journals just full of, like really small writing with just so much material in there, but it was just kind of like stream of consciousness. And then when it came to actually finding lyrics, in fact, normally what would happen is I'd edit it down to what I thought was reasonable, and then Bon and Dave would then edit it down to what was truly reasonable. And so we'd end up with these like kind of catchphrases, as like you say, anthemic, sloganeering. We were very influenced by the era of propaganda in Europe and Russia, and including, artists like John Hartfield, who manipulated the meaning of things really well from what was happening in the fascist nonsense that was happening in the 30s. And I definitely look it up if anyone's not familiar with John Hartfield that's watching. And that kind of made us look at everything in a kind of sardonic and like a way of being, still using some of the forcefulness of the propaganda, but using it to say something different to what was supposed to be being told to people. So we used a lot of that kind of reference. Certainly, the slogans were certainly for the first album, that was a really big part of it.
Mm.
In the middle of, you touched on it earlier, like in the middle of the 80s, I mean, you guys were post-punk revolutionary against the mainstream and the establishment, kind of, right? So how was it when you were in the studio and you basically got talked into by a cookie cutter hit maker into turning your track into something different? How did you deal with that? And you just mentioned earlier that you released a record that you actually weren't 100% happy with. How did you deal with this? And then later on, standing on the stage, it's just in my mind, watching Depeche Mode, which is a super credible act, but super successful pop stars. And you're watching them and you're like, right, like, wait a minute, we could use a little bit of that and maybe get our people to more, our music to more people maybe. How did you deal with this sort of paradox that you had to deal with? You're anti-establishment, but you're kind of noticing like, oh, if we do a little bit like this, then maybe we'll reach more people. How was that process?
Well, I think like everyone who's creating music or any kind of art, that you learn very quickly. Like you are like a sponge. Like I was listening just before I came on, I was listening to Mo saying that you were like a sponge, and that's how I think everyone starts and hopefully continues to do that. Like again, like referencing to what Ali was saying, I'll hear something that someone says in a grocery store and I'm just like, now I'll put it on my phone, but then I would like write it down on a piece of paper or whatever. You're just always kind of on thinking about how people do stuff. And like, well, that's interesting because they seem to be, in terms of music, they seem to be getting away with doing something that we still like. So if we still like it, then we could introduce that to what we're doing in some level, and the fans of us will eventually like it. I mean, they didn't necessarily like it all straight away. It would, we particularly made a point of every album, we'd finish an album and then want to do something completely different. Mm-hmm. So then we'd go to the next album, want to do something different. So for the poor fans, I think they always were coming to the shows and then like wanting to hear the album before, and we're playing them the new album. They'd go to the next tour and we're playing the album that they've just got used to, and we're doing another one. So it's kind of like just moving forward. I mean, I think we've become a little bit more stable in terms of that. We accept, you get to a point where, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense for anyone, certainly not for us. You get to a point where you're like, all right, these are our strengths. And this is why to whatever degree of success you have, this is why you're successful. These are the things that you need to deliver to not disappoint people. And that once you kind of get that, you know, without getting too Formula Phil about it, that's you get to that point where you're just like, I'm happy doing this because we kind of put all this together anyway.
Yeah.
And let's do it. I mean, I know that it's got to be for you guys because you guys play so much more than we do. We do a tour and then we go and do something else. I mean, fortunately for me, I'm going with Terence or with someone else as well in between that. But you guys are like out every week. Well, not 2020, but you guys are out, you know, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, two different venues a night kind of stuff, you know, when it's going crazy. And you just have to like, all right, this is what I do. You know, I'm good at this and I'm good at other things, but this is what people want to hear me do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it boils down to programming. I mean, it's the same thing when you're a band programming a show. It's like, you know, you release a new record, but your previous records are revered and you know instinctively the audience just wants to hear what they know. And you're trying to push the new album. And how do you find that sweet spot of
get the balance
sure
right?
Making sure because that's the only way to establish the new album. I mean, I used to always do my approach was always as a DJ, it was like play one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me, you know, kind of do it.
Kind of, exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
I guess a part of it too, as an artist, is just you kind of grown out of a sound that you've already gotten out of your system, and what you feel most excited about it expressing is what's fresh in your mind and what's new to you. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Yeah.
But then the good thing is now, especially with the tools that we all have, and the funny thing is, you know, looking at you guys in studio and I've been over to Mo's studio and we're all using the same equipment. Like, it's like whether you're an artist doing your songs or whether you're DJing, everyone's doing the same thing. So we have at our fingertips, and as we showed Chris with the SH1 being this big, you can bring stuff on the road with you, and just even if you're just going to use it for a couple of songs, it doesn't matter because it's taking up 6 inches by 3 inches on a massive table that you can change the focus of people still listening to the song or the hit that they hear, but you can change that focus into hearing it differently, and that helps. You're basically curating people, a bunch of people, you know, thousands of people in one room, how to go through this journey with you.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the amazing thing, actually, the massive similarities between what you guys do and what a band like us or Depeche do, actually any guitar band as well. You're just like the one for you, one for me thing is a really funny point of totally like that's we spend a long time doing the set, going through it, thinking about it, playing it. You do the first time of it out and you're like, all right, all that's got to change because you just can't deal with like people can't deal with what you think. You can't understand how people are going to think in a room together. It's just a completely different thing. And we've tried to make it, especially with on this last tour that we were doing in 2020, where we brought Dave, the original drummer that we had, and Simon Grange, who did all the original artwork for Nitzer. We made it deliberately kind of like a 3 DJ setup, or 2 DJs and then a percussionist and a singer, so that we could, like, if things aren't actually gelling as much as you thought, you just move to the next track, you know, pull out the next track and move on to that. Like, you know, obviously make it so it's not just like a skidding stop and then you go on. Sure. But there's a lot of things that are borrowed now in terms of electronic music, between DJs and artists, where it's really hard to actually see where the borders are. It's blended so much now.
How back in the days was not a typical, but how was it looking like when you produced an album? How did you do that? Did you guys get together for like 5 weeks, lock yourself up? How did that work back then?
So initially, like when we did that Total Age, then it was basically the songs that me, Bon and Dave had been writing for 2 years. And then, like, in fact, probably longer than that, because we took a year to rehearse before we did our first show, and I was 15. So from the age of 14 to 17, we'd been writing these songs. And
wait a minute, but did anyone tell you how that works, or did you just do it? You just or did you try to find a magazine where it was, oh, that's how you record a record? You just went winging it.
We until we met Phil Harding, then we didn't know how to record an album. We knew how to record things badly, but we didn't know how to record an actual album. And we were forceful about the stuff we wanted. He was quite forceful back as well about what he thought wouldn't work, and he helped us mold a one. You know, the thing about an album, which is hard to get your head around before you've made one, is that especially back then, you know, you've got side A, side B, it starts and finishes, but you've still got to think, like, people don't want to mess around trying to find the track that they want to listen to on their home stereo.
Yeah.
So you have to think about it as this complete piece. And that we didn't learn that until we were in the studio with someone that did it, hitmaker, but someone that did it. And then, so that first album was like, we would moonlight, we would go into PWL, like Phil would be mixing Dead or Alive or Pet Shop Boys during the day. The session would end at midnight. We'd go in the studio. He'd stay up with us all night till 6. He'd go home, get some sleep. We'd do whatever. He'd then mix someone else, make a massive hit, and then invite us back into the studio at midnight. So our schedule then was kind of crazy. But then once we got to do the first real album, where we had a budget from the label, which was Mute. We chose a producer, which was Flood. And we were essentially guided by Daniel Miller, which is his strong suit, guiding. And it was when Mute had moved buildings. So they'd moved into this new building, and he wanted to build a studio upstairs. And there was the studio was taking longer because of the intricacies of building a studio, the floated floor, all this kind of stuff. But there was a programming suite that was available. So he put us in there, and Bon and I would go in 7 days a week from like 11 till 3 or 4 in the morning every day to try and get as much music as possible before we were scheduled to have Flood come in.
Yeah.
And then we worked probably, like you say, it probably was about 5 or 6 weeks to record all the album and then to mix it.
But you had the lyrics ready, or you were working on the lyrics while working on the music?
No, we worked on all of it together. We still work that way, actually. Like, we're in the studio now doing another project that we have called Blackline, and we have kind of vague ideas. You know, I write a lot. It's always good having always have it with me, having a notepad that has, exactly. Pen and a notepad. I don't care if there's an iPhone or an iPad. I like the physicality of having a book. And we sit, musical ideas come up. And again, depending on what project we're doing, maybe we'll share musical ideas, but essentially Bon will do the music and I'll be doing the lyrics, melodies and lyrics. And then we'll start joining them together. And it's always been quite a quick process for us. So I guess from that point of view, we're lucky. But essentially we want that feeling of spontaneity and just, it's not that it has to happen tonight, because sometimes you listen to it the next day and you're like, anyway, just let's do something different today.
How you've been working with Bon for nearly 40 years now, right?
Yes.
How?
All right, Ali. Jesus.
Yeah. We can. Yeah. I date myself on this show every week.
Yeah.
At some point. But like, how do you? What's the dynamic between you two, and how has it lasted so long? And do you argue? I'm sure you argue. And I'm always talking about like creative partnerships as having like a beginning, middle, and end, just like certain relationships or personal friendships or whatever, and recognizing when it's finished and moving on. Parting ways amicably is something that I'm conscious of, and I try to do.
Yeah,
I don't
for sure.
burn bridges or whatever. But how is it that you and Bon haven't, split, or how, or maybe you have and we don't know about it?
We take long periods off, basically. So it could be 7 years, it could be 10 years. People are like, "When's the next Nitzer album coming?" We're like, let's wait and see about that. And sometimes we're not talking to each other, not because we saw each other in the street, we talk to each other, but it's like the intensity of creativity, and then the intensity of performing that creativity is draining. And I think add that to the fact that you're probably, in the case of Bon and I, definitely in the longest relationship apart from the one with your parents of your life, or your siblings. That this is, it's like you say, 40 years or something.
Yeah.
And so we take time off. When we were younger, we were young, so that helped. But we would finish a tour, take maybe a month off, go right back in, start writing, recording, mixing. As we're mixing the album, or as we're writing the album, the tour's already been scheduled. We're looking at like artwork and merch and dates and scheduling, go out on the tour, come back, have a month off, do it all again. We did that 3 times and then didn't speak to each other for 10 years.
That happened 10 years. There was a 10-year break.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how me and Terence met, Terence Fixmer.
I was just about to bring that up myself.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up too. So let's talk about that.
Been waiting for that break in.
Oh my God. This is hilarious.
Should call Terence in on the show.
He's just sending me notifications. This guy,
I've never met Terence.
Hold on. He sent me
Send him the link. Bring him in.
Give him the Zoom link.
I could send him
I'm
the
just
link.
calling him.
Call him now. So he's like, this is him. He's just sent me a WhatsApp.
I'm sorry, I'm showing his
I'm
number.
watching you. Oh, no, don't do that. I'll do it. Yeah.
Hey, Terence.
Terence, get on.
Terence, are you on?
He's like, what?
I think he's on.
You guys should have surprised us. You spoiled the surprise.
Actually, we should put him on Zoom. It's a surprise guest.
What up, Terence?
Send him a Zoom link.
Send him a Zoom link, Chris.
I'm gonna,
Terence, are you in front of the computer? Are you in front of the computer?
Douglas is like, no, I don't want that guy stealing my show.
I can send you a link.
He's writing to me
for just a short moment. Yeah? All right, I'll send you a link in a second. I'll send you a link.
This is how like
sorry, guys, I don't hear you. Oops, now I hear you.
What did he write you?
So he just wrote, as he's watching this. So Terence, we were talking about Bon and I having to take time off. Me and Terence naturally take time off because obviously he's got his solo career. But he sent me a message just now saying, "I'm watching you, so big nose." He sent me some tracks earlier. He sent me an email with some tracks earlier that I woke up to. And he's like, yeah, I think we could do some music in maybe 32, 33. 20, 32, 33. And then he says, use the link I hate you more than Trump. I hate you.
I hate you more than Trump.
Yeah, Terence.
You're very good in impersonating Terence.
So the road
Yes.
to Terence, the road to Terence is after 3 incredibly influential back-to-back albums, and then you and Bond decide to take a breather and
Hiatus. Yeah.
in that time span of 10 years that you guys don't speak, you meet Terence and you guys decide to collaborate. Is that kind of how it went?
And I'm sure Terence was a huge fan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So
Obviously.
what had happened was, it was actually, I think technically it was 5 albums because of we didn't actually do the back-to-back thing until so it's 4 albums back-to-back, 1 album which was Total Age, then 4 albums back-to-back.
Yeah.
And then I was actually doing film. I'd kind of gone out of doing music, kind of got burnt on everything. And then Terence, through Nova Mute, he was doing some, Nova Mute had asked a bunch of people to do remixes of.
I think I did one. I did Control I'm Here. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's very, very good one as well. And yeah, no, it's awesome. I definitely have played that out once I started DJing. But he contacted me to see if I would sing on a couple of tracks. He was already done an album and he had a second album coming out. And he asked if I could sing a couple of tracks on that. So it took me a little while. I was in London at the time. It took me a little while to get to France, in Lille, where he was based at the time.
Yeah.
And we went in the studio, and I think we were only in the studio for like 2 or 3 days. And we came up with so much material. Like he always has so much stuff, Terence. And so we got to the end of this like week or something working together, and we had an album. So then we're like, all right, well, let's do an album then. And it was kind of like the halcyon days of you know, you could go away every weekend and do shows all over Europe and have, you know, it was all very, even if people, you know, weren't exactly familiar with the combined forces, here he is. You know, it was all very, even if people, you know, weren't.
Terence, you need to turn your sound down.
Oh.
You got to stop watching the chat and actually just start participating.
It reminds you of like radio shows when people call in and then they're talking.
Please turn on your radio.
Turn your radio down.
Yeah, join the chant, man. Terence, you have oh wow, look at this. Welcome to the show, Terence Fixmer.
Oh, you're still muted. You have to unmute your mic.
Yeah, hit that mute button.
Yeah. It's there's a little icon. Like
is that your first Zoom call in 2020, Terence?
I don't do so much actually.
Hey.
It's cool, you know.
Terence.
Call in 2020.
This is my payback for sending me tracks.
It's been a long time, Terence. Haven't seen you in a while. I think the last time we saw each other, we were driving through the middle of Wisconsin somewhere, coming from the Even Further festival in the middle of the woods.
Last time we saw each other,
we were. Oh, who's got the sound on?
Terence, you need to turn your sound down because we. You need to turn the sound down off from the computer or something.
From the YouTube channel.
Maybe you still have YouTube running.
That's the same.
No, you need to turn the sound.
Now?
There you go.
That's better.
Hey!
Yeah.
Terence, thanks for coming on so spontaneously. We were just talking how Fixmer McCarthy came together. Okay. And then we thought we'll get you in. Obviously, we want to have you on the show like a solo guest too. But maybe since we have the two of you, you can tell us a little bit about your time together.
Okay, I think Douglas is more good for telling stories. I think so. For what to speak about it, you know. Yeah, how
I was just
yeah. Of course, I was a big fan of Nitzer when I was teenager, and so when I did my first album, Muscle Machine, on Gigolo in 2001, I remember it was, I think, in English mix mag. They say, yeah, it's kind of a new. If Nitzer will still be doing music, that would be the album they should or they would have done. And I was really, for me, it was a kind of really a big honor because I was a big fan. And then after that, I've got from Nova Mute, they asked me a remix for Nitzer, and like that was the starting point. So from that, I get the contact of Douglas, and then we meet in London, and then yeah, love story.
The romance started.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
So the first album was Between the Devil, right?
Yeah.
And there was an EP before that.
Yeah, there was this Free Fall and Destroy.
Okay.
And then
we've actually only done 2 albums.
Yeah, and singles.
2 albums, and then some singles.
Yeah.
We got bored of doing albums, so we just started releasing singles.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly an incredible live show.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, Douglas is a big performer. I mean, I remember the first time we played together. I mean, he come to my place in Lille, and we train a bit. We rent a kind of little space where we can try, because I never play. I was always playing solo, and it was my first time I play with a singer, and we just prepare loops. And I remember Douglas, at this time it was maybe winter, you have a big scarf, a bit cold, and you're really static, so I was playing and you were then I was okay, not so much energy, but the voice is there.
Part of the act, right?
And then we played in Barcelona, and it was Razzmatazz. First time.
Razzmatazz, yeah.
Razzmatazz, yeah.
And then I remember I was, because of course Fixmer McCarthy was new, and people maybe didn't make the connection. Who is Douglas McCarthy? Because the name Nitzer was more known than the name of Douglas. So, and as well, Fixmer McCarthy is totally new track. And so we prepare my own version of Nitzer, like John in the Chant. And then I remember in the first gig, so I start with the sequence of John in the Chant. And then I see Douglas like Mr. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like someone totally different, jumping, running, pointing fingers. I was totally impressed, and I was like, wow. And then I was like, fuck, I'm playing John in the Chant in front of, I don't know, thousands of people with the guy of Nitzer. Is it true? And
pinch yourself.
Douglas, how much pressure do you feel as I mean, you mentioned you toured with, and I've seen you tour with Depeche Mode, and you're watching Dave Gahan do his thing. How much pressure do you feel as a performer coming on stage? Is the weight of the band on your shoulders prior to coming on stage and while you're on stage? Or is it effortless? Does it come naturally once you go on there and once you get through the first song or the first few lyrics? Or what's your I don't know, what's your approach to all that?
Well, I mean, without coming across as too precious about it, I mean, when we were younger, it didn't matter. We're all just you're kind of like that, like we've talked about before in the show, kind of like that intense all the time. But you add something more, whereas when you're older, it's more of a performance. And, so without being too precious, I kind of get into a zone, and I concentrate, and I think I go through the set in my head, and I imagine, just kind of performing it. And it's actually very quiet backstage. It's kind of funny when people come back, I mean, even people that are really good friends of ours, they come back, and we're all just, specifically me and Bon, because Bon is very physical on stage too. We're just very quiet. And if it gets too noisy backstage, funny enough, then we'll find another room. Individually, we'll go to different rooms. Yeah. I like to be completely quiet and not have to be that sociable, and then go on, and then it all kind of explodes then in the right way, not the wrong way. And then once I'm done, then I'm free. I'm I can relax for the evening. Yeah. But an intensity, it's in terms of the responsibility, it's more. I mean, obviously, you want everybody who's paid money to come and see you to go away with a good feeling. You know, what I mean, it's not like screw the critics or anything, but we want the people in the front row that have waited outside in the cold or the hot sun or whatever to come in and really go away feeling like we got our money's worth, and it was really worth driving 5-6 hours to get here or whatever, you know, all the crazy stuff that people do. And that's the intensity. It's not really this shoulders, my shoulders have the band on it, and I don't think Bomb feels this way. We actually collectively feel that we've got a level of performance that we want to do, and it's very much a combative approach. I think it's slightly different when Terence and I are working together, because Terence is just two of us, and Terence has his own performance, but it's involved in the actually making everything work.
Sure.
And I think with Terence and I, what's different is, even though I do the same thing, I'm trying to kind of be as relaxed as possible before I go on, because it's less structured with Terence. Like Nitzer is more structured in terms of of more of an old school kind of rock and roll band in a way, where there's a set list. Terence and I mean, many shows we do, especially because we play a lot of techno parties. We literally will talk to each other during songs and like, all right, we haven't rehearsed in like 16 years or something. So we just go on. I mean, we've rehearsed all the time, but we talk to each other as the song's going on, and we discuss what's going to be next. So we have an idea of the set list, but it's much more of a DJ approach where we can change our minds a lot easier. But with Nitzer, there's always more people involved, and it's a lot more difficult to change things. But as I said earlier, we made it more like that environment in 2020 when we had Dave and Simon playing.
You wouldn't be able to tell that you guys don't rehearse. I mean, when I saw you guys play at that Further Festival in Wisconsin, it was raining and the entire place was covered. Everyone was knee deep in mud. And you guys were on stage.
Boots on.
You guys were on stage playing absolutely flawless, and the crowd was just going fucking berserk. It was such an incredible show.
God,
the energy was amazing.
Yeah, we
thanks, man.
Look in the eyes, and we know exactly.
Yeah.
I follow his voice. He follows my music, and at some point we find a flow.
Yeah.
Which Further was that? What year was that?
That was the very first one that they brought back, like the first.
Right? Oh, it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was the first, and everybody was super excited. So the energy was already electric, but then you had this kind of like almost Woodstock, 96 kind of mud fest, flashback coming back where everybody was just covered in rain and mud, and it was just it was the perfect setting for the right music, and everybody just went ape shit. So good show, man.
Thanks. Yeah, it was good all around. Everyone was good.
Yeah,
everyone was caked in mud. That's for sure.
So when did the Fixer McCarthy thing started? Like what year was that? Probably
2001 or 2, I think.
That early?
Yeah, and then we started. Then we actually did. We released the album was 2004, but so we'd finished that. So probably like 2002, we started playing shows. And so yeah, 2001 probably is when we started.
I look the year on it, yes. I write the year on it, but
and it was 2004, right? 2004.
Sorry,
it's the album.
2004, yeah.
The single, yeah, but the album was 2004.
And Douglas, did you know of Terence before he kind of got in touch with you? Did you know of his musical history, of his roots also in?
I didn't know any music? Of it.
None?
No, I didn't
and he was
know
like,
any of the,
what does this Frenchman want? What's going on?
I still wonder.
Okay, we solved that.
That's awesome.
Terence, I was thinking about that track, the old track you did, Electrostatic. Is that a influence from the Join in the Chant? I feel like it's very similar. I think about it. The
He's like, thanks for calling that out, yeah. That's one.
I just popped in my head right now. I was thinking about it because like I played that track. I brought it out recently, and then listening to the join in the channel, I was like, wait a minute, that sounds really familiar.
Well, talking about stuff like that, if you listen to, if you put on Nitzer Murderous and then play Divine Native Love, you may find a couple of similarities.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly the same.
You know what?
My wife, God, sorry.
No, I was gonna. Well, I mean, go ahead and finish your story. I'll ask afterwards.
No, go for it.
I was gonna ask you, what was your response when Rich did the Dex Effects in 909 mix, and ended up mixing in
Loved
like
it.
Let Your Body Learn? I mean, it
Loved
seemed
it.
to have bring exposure to Nitzer music again to a whole new generation of techno enthusiasts.
For sure. I mean, that's the thing that because it was kind of around about the same time as Terence and I began working together as well.
Yeah.
A little bit after maybe, but it's around about that same time. And you know, Terence and I have talked about this a lot. You know, half joking from Terence, obviously, because he doesn't know how to talk otherwise. But it was in a way the techno scene really did kind of bring Nitzer back because of the reemergence and what Rich did, what Terence was doing, and other artists, for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Minus Orange record, that's the one, Mo, you were telling me?
Yeah. Well, the Orange Minus, I think, was a single that they pulled off of the Dex Effects.
That's
That
909
sampled
mix.
Yellow as well too. I think an old Yellow song.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the Fixmer McCarthy project is already like also 18 years now in the making. That's incredible. That's insane.
Yeah.
I had no. Wow. And are you guys planning anything new since you're
Yeah, I mean,
on here?
it's like you have my.
Am I putting you on the spot here right now?
And those all projects as well, and so there's no really pressure. We make it really easy, and
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms, good.
No. Go ahead and finish for real.
All right, I was just going to say, if like our plans, like the Nitzer plans for 2020 were obviously like everyone else's plans were screwed. So Terence and I, we kind of loosely say, oh yeah, so maybe this year we'll do this certain, so we were looking at 2021. I'll probably be done with Nitzer, and then we'll need a break from that, do some Terence, then he would do a solo album. It's up until COVID, things have just dovetailed quite nicely into each other, but as we all know.
That's amazing. That's good. Terence, how was that for you when one of your heroes suddenly agrees to work with you? And then it's almost even 20 years doing this now.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, of course, the first time I met, like you have this, I'm totally like a little kid watching it, big fan, but now I sleep with him, one time he was a lot of story, One time you remember this story, huh? You sleep in my bed.
Tell the story.
So now I have Douglas sleeping in my bed one time, it's totally different, Sleeping like a lot of, No, now it's like a friend, it's like 18 years, and I don't see.
Well, the good thing is that what happens, you get as things as you get older. Then Terence thought I was so old when he met me, and then as we've gotten older, then it doesn't matter. Like you all end up the same age.
The age gap just shrinks a little bit. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's incredible. All right, I was just saying that I can relate to that feeling. Like for the first time that I met Doug, I think Douglas, you actually came to my house, to my studio with Reverend John from Das Bunker,
Yeah, I think so, actually. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
can't
the
remember why
doorbell-
we went to your house for that.
Yeah, I don't recall either, but I heard the door opened and you came in my studio, and I don't have a lot of chairs in my studio. And I remember Dougie sitting in the back, like up against the wall, and I'm like sitting there playing music that I was working on. And I'm like, holy fuck, dude, Douglas McCarthy's in my studio right now. I got to ask him to sign
And he
some
looks
records
so
before
old.
he goes. Yeah.
Douglas, did we establish why you're in Montana? Did we talk about that yet? Or can you talk?
We
why
haven't
you're-
actually. Yeah, I can talk about it.
What you're doing?
So
Sorry,
there's a
Terence,
Yeah.
thank you for coming on quickly. You can obviously stay if you want to, but if you have a dinner to do, because we just...
No, you have everything. Okay, salut tout le monde. Ciao. Salut.
Thanks,
all right,
Terence.
Cheers,
I'll
man.
speak to you tomorrow. Ciao. Ciao.
How do we do now? What do we do?
Just
I
close.
think you just hit leave call at the end. There you go.
The amazing thing is there's so much technology behind them.
Yeah.
I know.
We're gonna have one of those
Yeah, I think you
situations
got
where he
the
doesn't know that
idea.
the camera's off and he's gonna start getting undressed. And
Oh my god.
I hope so. Was
That one,
yeah.
the Jeffrey Toobin got fired from the New
Yeah.
Yorker for that whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how do you not know that?
Yeah. Poor guy. That's a terrible
last
way
year-
to go out. It's a terrible
It's-
way to go.
I mean, it might have been enjoyable at the time. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe that was part of the whole thing.
I'm sure he's thinking it wasn't worth it.
I'm sure his wife is.
So why are you in Montana, Douglas? Of
All
all
right,
places.
so yeah, it's as we were kind of discussing, you know, you have these down periods where you're working with one artist, or I have these down periods where I'm working with one artist and I work with another, and I got introduced to someone in LA that also Mo knows, Cyrus Rex, who worked with Skinny Puppy and has been all in the kind of like the behind the scenes in electronic music for many years. And I was living downtown and I was actually playing a show with Terence in Austin, Texas. And the I can't remember, it was the promoter. Anyway, someone there, we were doing the sound check. It was actually, I think we were opening for David J from Bauhaus or whatever. And someone from the promoters there said, we got talking and I was saying, well, I lived in downtown LA. And they like, yeah, there's a friend of mine, Cyrus Rex, you should check out his studio. He's got this amazing synth studio, like it's all analog gear. And this was before the kind of the big upsurge in analog equipment being so readily available. I mean, it was mainly like kind of Doppler, Schweiman, and, you know, really expensive stuff. And so he and we were introduced and we kind of like, you know, did the thing like, oh, hey, we live a couple of blocks from each other. You should come over. And I'm like, yeah, and didn't for like a year. Because of course, why would you see someone that's a couple of blocks away? And I think we ran into each other somewhere like not in LA and decided that it would be good to come over. And we just started hanging out, started doing some tunes as you do, you know, someone's got an amazing studio. You're just like, all right, let's try some stuff. Some expensive whiskey. Later, we came up with a few tracks and decided to try to do an EP. Did that, it got a little bit of traction. So we did another EP and started doing some shows. Skinny Puppy were doing a tour, so we opened for them. Cold Cave were doing a tour, so we opened for them. And then Depeche invited us into Europe to do a few shows in Europe. So then that kind of developed, and then by that time it was kind of ready again for either me and Terence or me and Bond to work again. So that was left a little bit. And then there was a downtime for myself and for Cyrus. So then we started working again, and a few more people started popping up into the kind of sessions, and it kind of organically grew into like, I don't know, there was like at one point there's like 9 people in the band, well, not in the band, but like doing music for this next record. And Bon happened to be one of them. A couple of other people, a good friend of ours from LA, and just, normal stuff that happens when you've got a nice place to hang out in and there's expensive whiskey. And we ended up doing another album. And by this point, we knew we couldn't just keep on with it, because DJ and Rex was our kind of like the abbreviations of our names. So then we couldn't put everyone's name on it, because it would just be this like string of letters. So then we called it Black Line, 2 words, Black Line, and did another album as Black Line. And so this is the second album of Black Line. And we're up in Montana mainly to get out of LA, to be honest. We literally left at 5 a.m. on November 3rd, election day, because we were fearful of how crazy it was going to get. The summer was pretty bad in LA with riots and looting and just general not very pleasant. Yeah. So we got out, drove up to Montana, which is absolutely amazing. We've been here like a couple of weeks, and the air and the general scenery, we've managed to come up with some really solid tracks. We're here for another couple of weeks, take a break and come back. But it's just, we have an opportunity to be in this amazing place and build a studio. And it seemed like a lot more fun than sitting in LA. That's basically the long and short of it.
So this is the next album you guys are finishing up now?
Yeah, we just started. Like we got here again. Like I was saying before, we like to approach things with a clean piece of paper, but we had a few sort of sketches of tunes. I had a few vocal ideas, but we've managed to do like 4 songs, I think, already. I mean, whether they make the cut is another thing, but
well, for anybody who's watching, if they're not familiar with Black Line, they should definitely go to your guys' Bandcamp page and buy the album. Thank
you very much. Well, we've done shows together.
Yeah, we had the honor of me and Luis's project Belief Defect. We had the honor of opening for you guys, and it's incredible. It's an incredible progression musically for you guys as well.
Douglas, how long?
Thanks, man, and for you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Now, I was going to say, how long have you made LA your home, and why did you choose LA of all places? Or you don't have to answer.
Started. No, I'm just trying to go back all of the reiterations of being in LA and why. Yeah. It started off with there's an album, a Nitzer album that ironically is called Big Hit, because it wasn't. And that was at the point where Geffen dropped us, I think. But anyway, we decided to do it in LA. We'd started in Chicago, and there was some problems with the studio and just kind of personality differences with the people at the studio. And it was winter in LA and summer. Winter in Chicago and summer in LA.
Wow. That's all you need to say.
To LA. Yeah, that's how it started.
Yeah, for anyone that's ever spent winter in Chicago, they'll understand.
Yeah.
How long have you been living in the U.S. and why with the move to the U.S.?
On and off, actually, since that time. So on and off. That would have been 1991, I think.
It's got to be for love and not music.
Yeah, there's been a few of the former and quite a lot of the latter. So I did end up actually going back to the UK. Went back to London for nearly 10 years, I think. And then actually that's where I started working with Terence. I'd moved back from LA to London. I was working in film. I actually went to school and started studying graphic design, and realized that I probably couldn't sustain any interest or enough interest to be just a graphic designer. So I started working in film. then was doing that for a few years. And when Terence and I started working, kind of got sucked into doing shows, doing music again. And as that progressed, as we were talking about with like what Rich was doing and the other influences from techno scene, Bon and I actually kind of just randomly, we were both in Chicago at the same time. I was doing a show with Terence, and Bon was doing, I think, some remixes for Billy Corgan. He'd done a Billy Corgan album and had worked on a Pumpkins album as well. So he was in Chicago working, and we just kind of got together for a couple of drinks, which ended up us chatting all night, and decided that we'd start the band again. That's normally how it starts again. No matter how it ended, then it starts again that way. And Bon was still living in LA, and it was easier to come to LA, and I was again out of love, or someone was out of love with me. So then it seemed like a good time to leave London and go back to LA. So that's why I went back and stayed this time.
And what's the vibe like out in Montana? Is it just, I guess it's all just countryside out there. I've never been, I don't know.
We're surrounded by acres and acres of fields and farmland. And then there's like low hills, and then the Rockies on like two sides of us. We're just, I mean, it's desolate, but in a really good way and a comfortable way, obviously, because we're in this amazing place. And then the local kind of town is, I don't know, anywhere where you go if you've gone to anywhere in kind of like Montana or any of the kind of mountain states, towns are all pretty similar. They're kind of like there's a lot of kind of Victorian architecture, oddly enough, because of the gold rush. People were making money, and so they were able to afford to build kind of grand hotels. So a little bit like going to, I don't know, like if you've been to someone's got like a music thing going on.
No, that's someone's cutting a tree in my backyard, so I'll just mute myself.
What?
Well, you should sample that.
It's annoying as shit, man. It just started.
The funny thing is, I immediately thought it was music.
I thought so too. They're cutting the trees, didn't they all burn down already?
I mean, I think our neighbor has an orange tree where the roots are starting to lift up the foundation, so they have to cut the whole tree down.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever do like field recordings when you were younger? To try, I used to do that all the time. Sheet metal factories, or taking like big glass jugs of water, and we'd break them in a tunnel, and somebody would be the other tunnel. Yeah, that was so much fun.
I mean, we were talking about doing it here. I mean, it's on a different level than that industrial kind of style, but there's a beautiful river down the street, and then you just go down there early in the morning, and just the sounds of everything. And like, we obviously haven't done it, not because we're not up early in the morning. We just want to go down and have a tranquil time next to the river.
I sent Cyrus. I sent Cyrus a text like 3 months ago because I wanted to borrow something from his studio, and he just replied to me. He said, "Sorry, I'm not home," and sent me a picture of that river. I'm like, "Where the fuck are you, man?" He's like, "I'm in Montana." I'm like, "What? Why?"
Yeah.
Random.
I mean, I think that's your first response, and then if you're able to actually see pictures, you're like, "All right." Yeah. But it's definitely. The history of like doing recordings, Ali, is I think that's kind of like the basis almost of electronic music, like tape loops and weird noises.
Douglas, I guess we have a lot of young folks watching, and what I was wondering is, like, if you look back in your career, like knowing what you know now, what would you have done different? What are you? Is there anything you wish you've done different?
What kind of wisdom would you...
artistically as well as business wise and stuff?
What's the most important lesson that that you learned, and what kind of wisdom would you like to pass on to, this generation?
To the younger yourself.
To your younger self.
To my younger self, don't get too cocky. Like, as soon as you feel like everything's made, something's going to kick you in the balls or vagina, whatever. But just try to keep your feet on the ground. I mean, and it's hard when you're playing and there's, like you say, it's like, you've got someone planning everything for you, and it's like, it's Tuesday, so I must be in Moscow. It's Thursday, so I'm in Athens. This kind of lifestyle seems very good on the outside, and it seems good when you're first starting. But I think that's basically it. Just try to enjoy what you're doing and not get too caught up in the hype of it all, which is hard. It's really hard. I mean, especially when you're young. I mean, I'm not being disparaging. I mean, I just know from experience and a lot of people around me.
Did that happen to you in a big way, or it's just more?
I mean,
what you saw around you.
It didn't happen in a big way necessarily, although some would disagree, probably Barn. But we didn't have to try very hard. Like, we wanted to be in a band when we were in high school, so we formed a band. We didn't want to play guitars, so we got electronics. We wanted to play shows, so we played shows. We wanted to be signed to Meet Records. We were signed to Meet Records. We wanted to go on tour. We were. So all these things it was very easy looking back on it. I mean, it's hard to actually, I don't know about you guys, but it's kind of hard to imagine what it must be like for a kid. You just take one of these and you've got more in that than we ever had starting out.
It's a different game these days. Everything is different.
There's a lot more tools
what do you feel?
in people's hands, but it seems like there's a lot less opportunity as well because of the amount of noise that's made.
That's very true. That's really true, actually. It was getting signed to a label. I'm making it sound as if we were so fantastic that who wouldn't sign us. It was just you've got three young guys who are making something that's, even if you're not, as a label, like, you may not understand it, but it's getting something going on. And who else are you going to sign? There were virtually no other bands to sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were lots of like copies of Duran Duran or whomever, but doing something that was raw electronics and aggressive weren't too many bands.
What role did Mute play then in your life as a label? As you mentioned, Daniel is an amazing person to guide one.
I mean, I think the thing about Daniel is that he started a label to release his own 7-inch single, The Normal. Mm-hmm. It's the only reason he started a label, because he couldn't, didn't want to go through a label or couldn't go through a label. And so he pressed, I think it was like 200 copies, went to Rough Trade, which was an independent distribution company based in London. And he was playing like punk shows by himself with, like an EMS, like doing just noise.
Yeah.
And so he never wanted to be a label. And he always had the feeling for the artist. And so when he saw young people, even from Daft, the reason he signed, Daft was the first signing he did after releasing The Normal. So from Daft to Fat Gadget, Frank, and like everything that he did during that time, like the birthday party when they first came over from Australia, they wanted to sign to Mute, and Dan loved them and said, I can't do anything for you. You should go and speak to 4AD, whoever it was that they signed to. So Dan never lost that kind of like energy and that spirit of doing something, finding something new and doing something new. So he had all the experience of specifically with Depeche, of like taking a band from nothing into like superstars, megastars. And he guided us and helped us out a lot on things. He worked in the studio with us from the very beginning. He once did live sound for us. He's very hands-on, and that's the difference, I think, with most labels. Apart from yours, Chris.
Oh, well.
Is there a backstory to this? No.
No, not. I was just making fun of. I was just making fun of.
Maybe Terence told him some
CLR.
stories. Maybe Terence told him some stories.
It's actually all Mo told me. Yeah.
Oh, Mo. Okay, it's either one.
It happens.
Yeah, it's a hands-on approach.
Lips get loose.
Well, what about you, Chris? You're doing stuff with Mute as well now, right?
Yeah, I'm
It only
just about.
took 40. How long? How many years?
What? Yeah, took 40 years to get there.
Douglas got signed to Mute when he was 15, 17? 17. 17?
17.
17.
Yeah.
It only took Chris.
Yeah, we're the perfect proof that anything is possible, you know.
Anything is possible.
That's what we used to tell the kids.
There you go.
Chris, how does it, let's interview you for a second. How does it feel, you being a Mute artist now? And we're talking to Douglas, one of our heroes. From the early days of Mute, is the circle complete for you, like in this moment?
No, it's a completely surreal situation where I find myself in, because I think as most of us, or some of us maybe, I don't really feel I deserve what the attention for what I do.
It's
because
called imposter syndrome, I think.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing, yeah.
It's a real thing.
I don't know how things work out. Things work out in a weird way in the universe somehow, or here. And it is. I basically have to pinch myself every day. Douglas, you were just asking what I'm doing at the moment. I was just basically last Friday sitting with Daniel online for like 6 hours to finally mix the album that I've been doing together with Ralf Hildenbeutel. And so the three of us were basically. That was our fourth mixing session online, finalizing the album, so that the second album is now done. And it is still so insane for me to basically look back, because I grew up in a little countryside village, and my brother was basically buying, Douglas, your records. That's how I first got to hear about Nitzer app. And obviously the likes of Front 242 and that direction. But I've always ventured out in a lot of different ways, and I was an early Depeche Mode fan too, an early The Cure fan, and stuff like this. And so basically my musical background has been formed by the label Mute, quite essentially. And I think a lot of us in our generation, if we know about it or not, but Daniel has basically influenced our generation to such a huge extent when it comes to musical taste and what do you want to achieve musically, what do you want to try to get. And he's so
even through Nova Mute as well.
Yeah, Nova Mute as well when it comes to the techno stuff. Mm-hmm. And so basically I've been growing up with Mute as a background hum noise, sort of the soundtrack of my early life. Going into DJing, I've never learned an instrument, my approach is just like really like, I try it, I can't do it. So again, I find myself in a situation where I've never learned an instrument. I'm suddenly releasing a record on Mute, which can only happen, I think, also with Mute, because it's so weird, it's so different. It's a place for outsiders in a way somehow. Not that I feel myself as an outsider, but an outsider of music. I'm an outsider when I talk about musicians. I'm not a musician. At least I don't see myself as one. But obviously there's a place, or somehow there's a place for me there. And now with all these influences that I had all my life, I'm able to basically turn those influences again into music, which again I'm releasing on that label, on that very same label, which is a surreal experience, to be honest. And I'm learning so much, especially of Daniel. He's such an incredible mind and a source, a well of wisdom. It's incredible. It's like only during these mixing sessions I was so listening closely, because Douglas, you know, he has his like subtle way of putting out information, and you really need to listen. Like if you're too loud yourself and too noisy in your head, you're not going to hear him. But if you hear him, you're like, whoa, all right, yeah. And he's so humble that he's not going to force anything upon you, but he's kind of like giving you a suggestion, and I mean, it's up to you if you listen to it or not. And I've learned from very early on, meeting Daniel. I think the first time I met him was in 2003 actually. That wow, yeah, you can learn a lot of this man. Not only about music, about life, about everything. It's incredible. And again, I'm pinching myself. I'm pinching myself that I'm sitting here talking to Douglas McCarthy.
He doesn't look that old.
It's crazy. So
when did you guys meet? Like before? Did you? Is there a funny story behind this, or no?
We were at Daniel's wedding. That was like one time where we had a little bit more time together at Daniel's wedding, which was 2 or 3 years ago. But we've kind of ran into each other randomly, and I remember very good the last time I ran into you. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah,
Douglas?
I was drinking a beer, walking down through.
It was randomly
on Auguststrasse or.
Yeah, it was randomly in Berlin on the street. I'm crossing the street. There's this guy standing in the corner with a beer in the hand, and I'm like, "Great, he's drinking a beer." And then I look at him, Douglas, what? We had a quick chat, and we passed again. Yeah, but it's always
it was a hot day. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to see you and meet you, and
you guys, yeah, for sure.
I looked up when we met, Douglas, and it was 2011 in Glasgow. Oh my God, yeah. I was playing in one. It was at the Arches, I think, and I was playing for the Slam guys. Right. And I remember telling Dave Clark, when my agent told me what the lineup was going to be, I lost my mind. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just make sure I meet the guy. I meet you guys. And then I didn't think it would happen as often. I'm in that situation. It doesn't happen. And then I remember DJing, and then you came into the booth, and I was just like freaking the fuck out in the middle of my set. And then we ran into each other at the airport the next day, like flying out. We were able to have like a proper chat at the airport while waiting for the flight. And these moments.
Yeah, I mean that's it. Yeah, they're fleet. Like, it's funny how often you bump into people. I know it sounds.
But Douglas, how
moving around, but.
Yeah, how is it for you to meet all these techno people now, these young artists that basically you've influenced their music heavily, and now there's this whole big scene.
A bunch of pricks.
Us talking about how influential Nitzer was for us.
A bunch of egos.
We love it. I mean, it's it's kind of like I keep going back to this tour that we did last year, but it was Bon and I were thinking about how to do another tour again, and we, like I said, we basically started to think, and because our friend and original member Dave and Simon, they'd started doing their own music that was very much more in a kind of techno vibe, and Bon and I had already started talking. He knows that I know a lot more than he does about, or did at that point, about the scene. And he wanted to kind of encapsulate that freedom and the way that everything moves. And so I think it's, even though he knew that there was an influence, when we're playing like Death Mental or, these big shows, he's really happy. Like, he's genuinely chuffed. I'm just as happy, but I've seen it before doing it with Terence, and last year was really kind of like the combination of kind of like, I wouldn't say it's like the lifelong dream of the band, but it's something close to that, where like we started as these young kids with no idea what we were doing, again, not musicians, picking up whatever we could afford to pick up. going through this 35-year career and then having still relevance is, I mean, who's not going to love that?
Yeah, it's pretty fucking awesome, man.
That's really awesome. My beer is gone.
That's
I just want to
Seriously.
cheer on that. My
Oh,
beer is empty.
actually, so is mine.
that's it.
Yeah.
Is that
People in
that's the
comments-
cutoff when all the
people in
drinks
the-
are done?
People in the comments want to know the Derek May story.
All right, it's not.
Is it
not as
appropriate?
salacious as it may sound. It's totally appropriate. It's totally appropriate. So we'd met Derek in Detroit, and he's, as always, larger than life. And Mute were really, especially Daniel, they really wanted him to do some remixes, and so I think it was from Belief. I think it was Control I'm Here and Captivate, one of the other tracks from that, but it was for the Control I'm Here single release. We got the remixes just as we were finishing the album, and that album, the tour, like I was saying to you, we do back from the tour into the album to the tour. We were in the studio and we had to take out the equipment from the studio to pack it to go to the airport to start the tour the next day.
Yeah.
And so we'd already listened to the remixes and we didn't like them. We told Mute we didn't like them. And at that point, back then, you just got a shit ton of remixes. And, we didn't care that we're running up massive costs paying people to do these remixes. It's like, we like them. We don't. So we'd said that we didn't like it to the label, didn't really think anything of it. So we're like a few days into the tour, or maybe a week or two into the tour. I don't know how he did it. Derek got the hotel number I was in and knew my room number and called me up and was yelling at me down the phone. Why the fuck are you turning me down?
Get out of here.
He didn't like And this is like before, like he must have called so many people to track down where we were. There was no internet. Yeah, this is like 1989 and he's yelling at me down.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's the non-salacious Derek May story. But he's a lovely guy. And we did actually release them eventually, like 20 years later.
Didn't have much of a choice at that point.
Douglas, there was one. You mentioned, remixers, and there was one thing I completely forgot to ask you about, which is the George Clinton remix of "Fun to Be Had." How did that happen? And I couldn't help but notice with the second and third albums, and you mentioned Cabaret Voltaire as well, and it seems like they were heavily influenced by funk, like P-Funk and just that style of funk, that sort of groove in general. And I feel like you guys also felt the same. And is that how the George Clinton thing happened, or what's the backstory?
Totally. I mean, we were always into funk. I mean, sort of the more obvious stuff of James Brown, but definitely like P-Funk and Funkadelic. And I can't remember which way round this goes, but either we just like Geffen were asking us to come up with some like different ideas for remixes. And I'm pretty certain George had done a like quiet kind of electronic album at the time. This is, it would have been like 1990 or whatever. And so it made us think, well, if he's doing electronic music, maybe he's going to want to do us. And ironically, Fun to Be Had is a lyric from one of the songs on Cosmic Slop. And so the label approached him to do it. And then he did the remix, was like very happy to do it. And like I said, I can't remember if it was before he did the remix or after he did the remix, but he was getting a lot of exposure and he was doing an interview in Rolling Stone or Spin. And he described Nitzer as the Funkadelic of techno. I mean, at the time, techno didn't necessarily mean what it means now. So we were just like, all right, we'll be full circle on that one.
Wow. That's an amazing story. Great.
I've got a picture which I cannot find for the life of me of he was in LA one time, so I went over to his hotel just to say hi. And I've got a picture of me because he's a huge guy as well. And I was like sitting on his lap. like a little kind of Heidi. And I don't know where the picture went. It's obviously an actual print picture. I looked everywhere for it, but I wish I had that. But he's a massive influence. I mean, a crazy guy that's gone through so much. Talk about sticking to the original idea and going with it. That's a guy that, honestly, he built the mold for doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I was in Deep Dish, we were in the first Apple iTunes commercial.
That's
where I
met, he built the mold.
That was weird.
Yeah, that's where I met George Clinton. He was in that commercial, and we were
there. Yeah.
We were there for like 10 hours, 12 hours with all these crazy artists that I was too shy.
Was that the campaign where you had these headphones hanging out, or whatever? What was that?
This was, we didn't even know really the full scope of who was going to be involved in this, but Chuck Berry, Barry White, Ziggy Marley, Iggy Pop,
that's nuts.
Dwight Yoakam, Liz Phair, De La Soul, Louis Vega was there. I think it was just Louis Vega and Deep Dish representing like dance music. But we were there for like 10, 12 hours the entire day with all these artists. And I still can't believe it happened. But sometimes I look at the commercial and I met George Clinton.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of being able to work with George very intimately in the studio for an extended period of time when I worked as a recording engineer. And the amount of insane things that I learned as an assistant engineer in that studio recording vocals with him was insane. I remember this was kind of when Pro Tools was really kind of very early relevant in the studio. And we would do multiple tracks of vocals, and he wouldn't even get through an entire verse without like mumbling up something and just, go back and punch in again, go back and punch in again. But he never wanted me to delete any take that he had ever done. He wanted me to keep every single take. And at the end, I was like, we're just wasting hard drive space with all this stuff. I mean, I just want to like delete it.
Because you had to worry about it back then.
And then like crossfade between all of them and like plug all this shit in. And I remember he walked in the studio and he said, all right, take the beginning of track 1, take that of track 2, that of track 3, track 4, track 5, combine those together and render. And he didn't even listen to him. Like he had just calculated this shit in his head. And I remember we rendered it and I listened back. I was like, there's no way. What?
That's why he's George Clinton.
Yeah, it was just like perfect.
Yeah.
The whole take. I mean, incredible.
Well, Douglas,
That's
this is
sat on his lap in his hotel room.
Say again?
That's why I sat on his lap in his hotel room.
I'd love to get that picture, man. It'd be pretty.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute honor to have you on. Great to see you again. I'm sure you want to get back to making music in the beautiful cabin that you're in.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Thanks so much for taking the time and sharing all these stories with us. Really. This means so much.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
It's good to see you.
Nice meeting you, Dave. See you, Mo.
And say hello to the load of
give
the crew
our love
for me.
give our love to Audrey.
I will, man. Give a big hug to Brad and Cyrus and everybody. Tell them I said what's up.
I will. Absolutely.
Good luck and good vibes in Montana.
Everyone, thank you so much. Everyone stay safe and we will see each other again for real.
All right.
Good luck in the studio.
All right. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
See you next week. Thanks everyone for watching.
All right, guys. Thank everyone.
Indeed.
Good to see you.
Man.
Thanks,
Cheers.
guys.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.